How's it going? Well, today's video is going to be a little jumbled up, kind of everything squeezed into a ball here. What's been going on the last few months? I've gotten away from the daily or the weekly updates. I've been trying to get back into it here. It was a busy fall last year. The winter was a little crazy, and going on with TikTok and other stuff. I just kind of been neglecting the YouTube videos, but that's all about to change. After today's video, you're going to be fully caught up with what's going on in the shop. I don't know if you can hear in the background what's going on right there. We'll get that in a second. But we'll catch up to the shop, the engine, and the build on the 64 behind me here. And then going forward, we should be back to a more consistent week-to-week video of what's going on. But yes, there's been a lot of big changes in the shop here. And we'll flip back and give you a quick little show. And let's get right into it. Welcome back, everyone. So with the videos being far and few between, there's definitely a lot going on in the background these days. Been a busy boy. Straw season is practically done. I think I have 180 bales left. But I've also been busy and got myself in a nice metal roof. So I decided to go with a tin ceiling. I put all this metal in probably 3 weeks ago by the time you see this video. Still got to get my ceiling fan in, but it is complete. The ceiling is finally complete, and I can now throw some insulation up there. Insulation, we are definitely in the winter. It's minus 23 today, but I got myself a new little electric heater. I do run a small one here as well, but even though the ceiling's not insulated, running this heater for about an hour and a half, we're able to keep it here about anywhere from 6 to 10 degrees inside the shop, which is great because there's been a lot going on with the 64. So a couple weeks ago, we're finished with the engine. It's wrapped up over there in a bag. That's all that's getting done on that for now. And I dove right in to the 64, removing rust. Cut out all the floor that was rusted out on the passenger side, which really wasn't that bad. Just that one spot there. And there is a hole down there I got to take care of. But the driver's side, well, that's another story. She is a mess. Climb right in here so you can see what's going on. You can see I've cut out all the rusty floor, which is about, 90% of it. But once I got indoor, the frame rails themselves are perfect. There's nothing wrong with them at all. Structurally, the car is fine. This side here, I haven't punched a hole through yet, but both cross members look like this. They're rotted right out. The bottom half is fine, that the torsion bar attaches to, but there's a secondary cap that runs on the top. It goes over the top of the engine rail. These are the frame rails here that actually go to the engine, and the other half goes under the bottom. Well, this top one, where the floor sat and rotted out, it also rotted the top of those. And in doing that, and taking the floor out, the complete rocker panel on this side, right back to where it butts into the rear half of the car, is completely gone. I have outside of this rail, but working on the rocker panel here, I removed everything that is just rust. What you see left behind here actually is a different part of the member, which actually is part of the front clip and the rise that goes up to the front of the cowling. And right where this line is, that's solid. So I've got everything cut out, everything ripped apart. There was an inner member here. It was completely gone. I put in a piece of 8-inch plate and started welding that in as well. And this is going to be my new inner rocker rail that's going right down the side here. It is 1/8 inch as well, about twice as thick as what the car is built out of. I think everything on here is only about 16 gauge, and it'll be starting right at this point here. I got some holes here. I'll be plug welded in. This was originally all tack weld. That's the only way this thing was in, was tack weld. So I'll tack weld it here. Of course, there's nothing in between it. Then I'll be tack welding it to the very front member as well. Now once that is on, I can get my distance out from the edge. I took all the measurements before I cut this out. And then I'll weld a top cap on her as well. And it'll completely box the inside of this in. Now when this is done, everything will be sealed up inside here. Gonna have to make almost like a little bird box. Kind of jigsaw this back together here, leaving a nice little curve on the bottom, because I will be making new floor pans. I have the ones that actually were no good that I was going to return, they didn't want back. I can use them for the most part. They just need to be modified heavily. So I'll be putting that floor plan in, but then I got to remake my own for back here because there is nothing available at this point. Now another thing to take in account here on this rail was this hole that is actually the mounting plate for the seat belts. Now originally, these are two little tiny tack welds that hold this in. And I was able to knock it out with a hammer and a chisel perfectly. Like they popped right off. Now I've welded them onto this new plate. And again, I'm at least twice, if not 3 times the thickness of what it originally was. And I was able to get my measurements over here from the little nub where the hole went on the other side. So I know I'm in the right spot. So my next point here, or next step, is to get this rail I made put on, just held on with a pair of vice grips, get it leveled up, make sure it's level back here, level to the front. I'll put a straight edge the whole way along this to make sure it's as straight as possible, and then I can measure my distance into this frame on the top part of the rail, and I'll be able to weld it all together. So here we are with the finished inner rocker. Got her all welded up, got that seam welded solid, got it stitched along the side, and I made sure I did my welds back and forth bit by bit, and I used a straight edge to make sure that was staying true. And it worked out great. I did use a ratchet strap to pull both sides of the car together because I did take that measurement for the width. The little box here on the end looks a little crude, but it went together good and solid. And actually when I was welding down here on the bottom, I started blowing through, and I got out the hammer and a chisel, and I found out there's quite a bit more just in this lower corner. There's like a little dip, and it must have been holding water, and it was all rotted out. So I cut that material out. There wasn't much left to it except for dust, but I cut that all out, put in a new piece of 1/8" plate, welded that in, and it is good to go. Same as on the other end here where that big hole was. I made this piece taper off, kind of almost like the front of a boat, and it fit in there really good. Got it completely welded solid, sealed up, and it's finished as well. So working my way along, I end up putting the brackets back in for the seat. This is what the seat mounts on. And I use the other side as reference so I could come back and forth between the holes to make sure everything lines up. I even measured diagonal to make sure it's square as can be. It might be maybe an 1/8 if you're lucky, but these are just a 3/8 bolt that goes through here, and these are elongated 1/2" holes, so there's lots of room to move that chair around so it'll fit right nice. But yeah, they went on good, went on nice and clean, some good solid welds there, no bubbles, looks real nice. And that brings us to the end of this stub member. So yeah, that whole thing that was rotted out there is only this top cap, which is actually the part that's attached to the unibody that is the floor and the whole assembly that everything you see in here. It's separate from the lower part, which is actually the frame, which welds through. Got a large cap on the bottom here, but this and this part here is the frame that goes forward to the engine and suspension and holds the front end of the car to the back half of the car. So I got all that rotted metal cut out of here, cut the bolts off, and it's so strange that underneath, you know, this is perfectly solid. There's barely even really, there's not even really pitting actually on here, but it's such a difference between whatever this metal is or where it was made compared to this other stuff, because the tin that's used to create this floor is just garbage. So I was originally going to cut this with a zip cut disc, but it was not looking good at all. Local shop in town cut me up some plate. This is the same 1/8" plate basically that I'm using for everything else, and they were able, with some measurements here, come up with some perfect pieces to make this. Those are my new tabs. These will weld onto the sides as well, and one for the other side. And it'll make this kind of a cap that I'm going to fit on. And I also have some 1/2-inch plate just like this here as a stiffener that I'll run and continue along the edge as well. Just like that, we got it tacked up, and that is perfect seams, perfect little gap in there. Because I do have that other little piece that'll make the stiffener plate all the way along here. And of course, I got my tabs going out to the frame, and I'll have to put my hole through here, one through the side. But all in all, looks pretty good. So I'll pop it off and weld it all up. Now, don't look at those welds too close, but what we have here is a completed stub member end for that floor frame. Got my holes in here where the 2 bolts got to go. But all in all, that thing turned out awesome. Let's see how it fits. Like a glove. Nah, notched a little bit too much out of there. That's easy to bridge. Holes are, that one's perfect, and that one's good too. Awesome. And just like that, with a zip, zip, zip of the welder, we got her in. She's going nowhere. It welded in right nice, buttered up good. Good weld. My 2 halves here were a little bit off with my measurement, but I was able to bridge that gap with the weld. And the same down here. Then of course, on both sides, I come up fully all the way around the frame and down. Good penetration. And that turned out perfect. And I was able to keep my holes, of course, nice and centered. And I'll have to pick up some hardware for that. I think I'm going to go with some grade 5 nuts and bolts. Or sorry, grade 8 nuts and bolts. I have grade 5, but I thought I'd just go a little stronger. The stub member, or the member that this stub fits into, which is up inside here, theoretically it can drop out if I take my jack stand out that I have down there. So I'm going to leave that in, get my bolts tightened in there real good. I'll pick up my bolts for the other side too. I still got to pop a hole through where it's at. And then I'll probably just give this all a coating over on the side. Completely rebuilt rocker panel and stub member there for the mounting of the floor. Now the coating I'm going to put on is just going to be like a rust paint, just something to, help prolong it a little bit. Nothing special. There's still going to be a lot of grinding here and burn through because I still got to weld my floor pan in and stuff like that. So we'll be picking up a can of either the spray zinc or the spray copper, the weld through primer. And I'll use that all around my edges as well too, as I weld in all this floor pan. And then when it's all done, we'll be putting seam sealer in either chassis coat or Pour 14, one or the other. It'll just be a nice big heavy black matte coating, kind of like a rubberized coating. It'll help with corrosion as well too, and also keep some of the road noise down. But mainly I want that seam sealer in there just so I don't have any exhaust or anything come through this cab, so she's nice and tight. It's finally happening. I almost forgot the video. We were just ripping on here, starting to get this thing going. And then just got a couple little bits sprayed here. And I decided, you know what? I definitely got to video this. Got my friend helping me today. The wife got called into work. So we're going to knock her out. Hopefully get this done in a couple hours. Here comes, there we go. So down there, my baffles, I'm just shooting underneath it to bring it up to it, making sure I'm not covering it. You can see that baffle sticking out. That's about the 15 inches. Then I'll just work my way back all the way to the center. Every second one doesn't have a baffle, so we'll make sure to blow that right down to the end. Comes out pretty good. Whew. That job, am I ever glad that is done. Not really a hard job, but man, you boys that do this for a living, I would much gladly pay the next person to do this. Whew. I'll insert a picture here of what I look like after I did this. This is the hose. This is the hose that was up there. I guess I should have did a pre-video, but honestly, I jumped into this so quick and I was so excited that I had some help, because actually I had this thing home and then the wife got called into work and Lex said, sorry, I can't be here. So I was a little bit down, but I got a hold of a buddy and he was able to jump right over here. So this is the machine that blows it up there. This one's a 2 horsepower Intech Force. It's pretty, all it is basically is just a reverse shop vac. So if you have to plug in the 2 separate outlets and they both draw 15 amps. So you got to make sure you got a good shop. You ain't putting this into a 15 amp on startup. I'm sure you're going to blow the breaker. So I had to run one to one side of the shop, one to the other. So I'm on 2 separate 20 amp breakers. And of course, you have your power switches here. Get the blower started first, and then get that agitator start going. Now we messed around with the speed a little bit here. At 100, it was just way too much, way too fast. It was just blowing it everywhere, and instead of piling it up, it would just kind of knock it over and just throw it everywhere. So we found around 85 to 90 was a perfect spot, and then we just kept this hopper full the whole time. So here's a chewer there. Now we did break it up a little bit as we went in. We just didn't throw in a whole bale. We just broke it up a bit, tossed it in there. And these paddles spin around and chew it up. And that's your fan blade there spinning. And it scoops a little scoop of it, shoots it out the hose, and away it goes all the way up into the attic. It worked really good. Now this blown cellulose, there is a little bit of everything in there. There's newspaper. Sometimes you can see there's some like letterhead. Every once in a while there'll be a bigger chunk. There's even some bits of plastic. I guess it's everything that's recycled. And that's what it is. It's all newspapers and office recycling, all shredded up and sent out. A little stone or a staple every once in a while come flying through there. I could use my hand kind of to baffle it, and I could feel them hitting. And but yeah, it never plugged once and it worked really good. Now I did buy a bunch of extra bags, and actually I am 2 less than what it said I should have been. Should have been able to fit 72 up there. I bought a bunch extra here, and really 2 more of these I should have put up, but it is what it is. There's some high spots, some low spots. Not big deal, not worried about it. R50 is what I was going for. Maybe it's around R40, and that is more than sufficient for a shop and keep all that nice heat from the wood stove in there where it's usable. So now, just got to clean all this up. Got quite a mess out here. Get the sucker wrapped up, load it in the truck, load up the few bags that I didn't need, get a refund on that, which will be nice. And then I have to find something to do with the rest of the day, because it is beautiful. The sun's sitting high. I think it's only about -4, -3 out here right now. And I might have to have me a Corona or 2, maybe 3. So now we are back to current time. Today is the day. You're watching this today. This is where I am at with the 64. I have completely got the passenger side finished. There was a small hole down here that's done. Wasn't a big deal. But fitting in this floor pan, in the transitions, and the curves and stuff like that in the floor, it took a lot of work. These are all complete full welds. And it's really hard going from the heavy plate steel, I shouldn't say heavy, 16 gauge to 19 gauge pressed pans to whatever the floor is. I think the floor seems to be about an 18 gauge is what I think it is. So welding this all together is a bit of work, but it turned out well. In the end, it is solid. And over here on the driver's side, this is everything that has been built out of the 16 gauge steel, fully welded in the back. Everything is complete. All seams are done. The transition into that pocket that was in there, that's been filled, closed off, and sealed. And the front floor pan is installed. And where I'm going to be starting again now is just finishing up this corner. right in this corner is where the throttle pedal goes through, and I'm having a bit of an issue trying to figure out how I want to build this. There is nothing available new, or I should say new as an aftermarket, that is identical to the setup that's in here. So I'm going to have to close this right off, I think, make some templates so I know exactly where those holes are, and try to build something that's going to fit an aftermarket foot pedal. Now, as for the engine, it is as it was that you saw last week. For the most part, engine is complete. Of course, you got, I got to put the valve covers on, I got to get an intake and a carburetor, stuff like that. But that's to me, that's outside the engine. That's the accessory part of it. Everything else is complete on the engine. It is sealed up and lubed up well, and it's staying wrapped up here for a bit because unfortunately I can't start this thing out of the car. My ring gear is actually part of my torque converter, and of course the torque converter bolts up to the motor via the flex plate, which is very thin and only held on by 4 bolts. And having a 40-pound torque converter spin around on that little flex plate, that is not a shop that I want to be in when that is happening. So unfortunately, it has to wait till it gets the transmission, and then of course gets put into the 64. But this wood stove installation into the shop has been the biggest game changer by far, along with the installation that's in the attic. This is just awesome. I've gone from trying to do what I can with a small electric heater, which did work. It'd get it up to 8 degrees or so, something like that, but almost $300 a month in electricity just to keep this place above freezing. So not a viable option. The wood stove here, well, I've had to learn how to regulate my heat. It easily gets the shop up to 23 degrees and warmer without watching it, which is way too hot to be pounding and banging on metal. So I found out my sweet spot is between 12 and 15 degrees Celsius. That's where it feels good. I like wearing hoodies. I like having sweaters on while I'm working, especially around grinding and stuff. So 12 to 15 degrees works out to be a perfect temperature. But that is it for today's video, and you are now fully caught up of what's going on out here at Duchesne's Corner. I'm glad for everyone that stuck around. I am really happy for a lot of the viewers from TikTok that jumped over. And other than that, onwards and upwards. Hope you guys have a great week. And I am really going to try to get back on the week-to-week videos here on YouTube. So thanks for sticking around. Love you all. Catch you again later.